Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something that has the potential to completely change how we work with large language models.
That's pretty fascinating stuff.
It's called complementary prompting, and basically it's all about combining different AI prompt templates
Yeah,
to kind of unlock these serious power-ups for your LLMs.
that's a good way to put it.
So instead of just using, a single tool, think about like you're being given this whole toolkit.
Right.
And each piece is really designed to, bring out those different strengths and capabilities of the LLMs.
Yeah, I mean, it is really a fascinating evolution. For so long, we've approached LLMs with this single prompt mindset,
Right.
but now by strategically combining these different templates, we're really moving towards a more nuanced
For sure.
and a more interactive approach. It's almost like
Yeah.
having a conversation with the LLM, guiding it step by step
Yeah,
to reach these deeper levels of understanding and insight.
absolutely. And, our source material actually breaks down three main approaches.
Okay.
So there's sequencing prompts, there's pairing prompts, and then there's strategic prompt orchestration.
Interesting.
And what's really cool is how this entire concept
Yeah.
actually mirrors other creative fields.
Okay.
So like think about a painter, right?
Sure.
They use, a variety of different brushes, palette knives, sponges to create a masterpiece.
Right.
Each one of those tools contributes to their final result in a really unique way.
I see what you're saying. So with this complementary prompting, we're essentially doing the same thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
You got it. And so let's say you're working with, just this massive data set, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just trying to extract all of that information all at once,
Right.
you could use a combination of these templates.
Okay.
So you could first use a prompt to just get a general overview
Uh-huh.
of the data, highlight those key trends patterns,
Makes sense.
and then follow that up with a more targeted prompt
Okay.
to extract very specific data points or
Right.
compare certain variables.
I see. Yeah, this layered approach. I mean, not only would that make the process way more efficient,
For sure.
but it allows you to refine the output
Uh-huh.
to be way more precise
Right.
and relevant to your actual needs.
And, that precision is
Yeah.
really key, especially when you're dealing with, the sheer volume of data that many of us are facing these days,
That's a
right?
point.
It's not just about getting answers anymore. It's about getting the right answers
For sure.
and having those answers presented in a way that's useful and actionable.
Right. And I mean, the potential benefits are huge.
They are massive.
If you think about, the implications for business analysis.
Yeah.
Imagine, not having to spend hours manually sifting through spreadsheets and reports.
Oh my gosh.
Instead, you can use complementary prompting to just automatically extract and compare those key data points,
Right.
identify trends,
Mhm.
even generate summaries tailored to those different stakeholders. I mean, the time savings alone could be transformative for businesses.
Absolutely. And, the material highlights a really great example using that ask before answering
Okay,
and that ask AI to improve a prompt combination.
interesting.
So let's say you've got a knowledge base article on troubleshooting phone battery issues,
Okay,
but it's pretty generic.
Yeah.
It's not really helpful for those users experiencing those very specific problems.
yeah, I see.
So with complementary prompting, you can actually address this by first having the AI ask the user clarifying questions,
Okay,
like what apps have you been using recently?
uh-huh,
Or, have you noticed any unusual battery drain
interesting.
while using, a specific app?
Yeah,
And then based on those users' answers, right?
Right.
The AI can refine that original knowledge base article
uh-huh,
to be much more specific
okay.
and tailored to their situation.
That's awesome. That's a perfect example of, how complementary prompting can lead to, a more personalized and effective user experience.
Absolutely.
And this personalization, I mean, it's applicable across so many areas, Consider research, for example.
Right.
Imagine a team, exploring a very complex hypothesis.
Yeah.
Complementary prompting could help them to sift through, mountains of research papers, extract those relevant findings,
Uh-huh.
compare all those different perspectives,
Yeah.
even have the AI act as like a devil's advocate to challenge their assumptions.
It's almost like having a research assistant constantly working in the background,
That's a great way to put it.
analyzing data and offering insights.
Yeah. And, as LLMs continue to evolve, we can expect even more sophisticated applications of these techniques.
I think so too.
We're moving beyond those simple question and answer interactions to a much more collaborative process.
Yeah.
Where we're guiding the LLM, refining its outputs.
Right.
And really unlocking insights that wouldn't even be possible otherwise.
Absolutely. Now, while this all sounds incredible,
It's pretty cool.
I'm sure some of you out there are thinking, okay, but how do I actually create these effective prompt chains?
Yeah, good question.
What's the secret sauce?
Right.
Let's explore that aspect next.
It's not so much about a secret sauce as it is about a structured approach.
Okay.
Crafting these effective prompt chains. It's
Yeah.
a lot like, planning a road trip.
No.
You wouldn't just start driving, without knowing your destination and the best route to get there.
Definitely not, no.
Right, exactly.
I like where you're going with this.
Good.
So what is our roadmap for creating these prompt chains?
Well, the source material really emphasizes, the importance of breaking down that task
Okay.
you want to accomplish into those smaller logical steps.
Okay.
And this means, really having that deep understanding of the problem you're trying to solve.
Right.
Identifying that specific information or insights you need to reach a solution.
So it's about clearly defining your goals.
Yes.
And then reverse engineering the steps needed to get there.
Exactly.
Using the LLM as a tool along the way.
Precisely. And just like with road trips, you need to consider the capabilities of your vehicle.
Right. Of course.
And in this case, our vehicle is the LLM.
Okay.
And, its capabilities are defined by things like its context window.
Context window. Now, that's something I haven't heard of before.
So a context window is essentially the LLM's short-term memory.
Okay.
So the larger the context window, the more information the LLM can hold in mind at once.
So that makes sense. So for tasks that involve multiple steps or a progression of ideas, a model with a larger context window would be more effective.
Exactly.
It's like choosing a car with enough trunk space for all your luggage on that long road trip.
Exactly. And it's also important to recognize that, not every task is well suited for chained prompting. It really shines.
When you need that LLM to demonstrate a deep understanding of a subject.
Right.
Engage in multi-step reasoning or synthesize information from various sources.
So it's like having, that specialized tool in your toolkit. You wouldn't use a hammer for every job, right?
Right.
But for certain tasks, it's the perfect instrument.
Exactly.
Now let's move from, theory to practice.
Okay, I like it.
The source material actually dives into some fascinating examples of complementary prompting in action.
Perfect.
Are you ready to explore those?
Absolutely. I'm excited to unpack these real-world applications.
Awesome. So one that really stood out to me
Yeah.
was the combination of extraction prompts with comparative prompting.
Okay.
So imagine you're tasked with analyzing last quarter's sales reports for a company with multiple product lines, and you're facing, mountains of data.
Yeah.
Need to quickly identify those key trends and insights.
It's a scenario many of us can relate to, I think.
I think so too. Data overload is a real challenge. Absolutely. And this is where, this complementary prompting really comes to the rescue.
Okay.
So first, you would use an extraction prompt to pull out those specific data points from the reports.
Okay.
This could be things like, sales figures for each product line, customer demographics, regional performance, really anything relevant to your analysis.
Okay.
And instead of, manually sifting through those spreadsheets, the LLM does the heavy lifting for you.
Okay, that already sounds like a huge time saver. But how do we actually make sense of all of that extracted data?
Right. Well, that's where that comparative prompting comes in.
Okay.
So now you can ask the LLM to actually compare, those data points that you've extracted.
Right.
You can ask things like which product line had the highest sales growth? Or, are there any noticeable regional differences in customer preferences?
I see.
And the LLM can analyze those relationships and provide you with, those targeted insights that would be incredibly difficult to uncover manually.
It's like having an AI analyst on your team.
Yes.
Capable of quickly identifying those most important patterns and trends hidden within the data.
Precisely. And this combination, it isn't limited to just sales analysis.
Sure.
Imagine, researchers comparing data from different clinical trials to identify those subtle patterns, or financial analysts, assessing market trends to make those more informed investment decisions.
Yeah.
The ability to quickly extract and compare that relevant information, it's invaluable across countless fields.
Absolutely. Now, this next example really piqued my interest.
Okay.
It involves the combination of multiple perspectives and expert critic templates.
Interesting.
It sounds incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through that one?
Sure. So let's take, a complex scenario.
Okay.
Imagine a new healthcare bill is being proposed. This bill will likely have far-reaching consequences for a variety of stakeholders.
Of course.
Patients, providers, insurance companies, and more.
Yeah.
So using that multiple perspectives template,
Right.
we can instruct the LLM to summarize the bill from each of these viewpoints.
So we're not just getting a single interpretation, but a multifaceted understanding of how this bill could affect, different groups.
Right, but it doesn't stop there.
Okay.
The expert critic template then takes over.
Okay.
Think of it as, a panel of virtual experts, economists, healthcare professionals, legal analysts.
Wow.
Scrutinizing those summaries
Okay.
and offering their critiques.
So we're going beyond mere summarization to a deeper level of analysis and evaluation.
Exactly.
What kind of insights could this approach provide?
Well, the possibilities are vast. The expert critic AI might highlight, those potential unintended consequences of the bill, point out strengths and weaknesses in its design, or even suggest alternative solutions that could lead to, more desirable outcomes.
It's like having a virtual think tank, helping you dissect these complex issues from every angle.
That's a great way to put it.
That could be incredibly valuable for policymakers, researchers, even journalists trying to provide that balanced and insightful coverage of complex topics.
Exactly. And this brings us to another intriguing example.
Okay.
One that really showcases the creative potential of this complementary prompting.
Okay.
It involves combining the chain of density prompt with the tone changer.
That sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
What kind of power-up does this combination unlock?
This pairing is all about tailoring communication to those specific audiences.
Well,
Imagine, you're a climate scientist tasked with communicating, the latest research findings on climate change to different groups, the general public policymakers and fellow researchers. Each audience needs a different level of detail and a different tone of communication to effectively grasp the information.
So using the chain of density prompt, you could generate, different summaries of the research findings.
Right.
A concise and easy to understand version for the public, a more detailed and analytical version for policymakers, and then a highly technical overview for your fellow scientists.
Exactly. But then comes the tone changer.
Okay.
This allows you to adjust the tone of each summary to resonate with its intended audience.
This is where it gets really interesting.
I know, right?
So for the general public, you might want a more hopeful and solutions-oriented tone. For policymakers, a more neutral and data-driven approach might be more effective.
Right.
And then for your fellow scientists, a purely objective and technical style would be most appropriate.
You've got it.
Okay.
It's a brilliant example of how, this complementary prompting can help us move beyond that generic communication to a much more nuanced and tailored approach.
For sure.
Ensuring that our message resonates with its intended audience and achieves its desired impact.
It's like crafting a bespoke suit.
Love that.
For each audience.
Yes.
Ensuring a perfect fit for every occasion.
I like that analogy. And just as a well-tailored suit, can make that powerful first impression, the right tone and level of detail can make all the difference in effectively communicating that complex information.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to an example that's particularly relevant for those in customer service and training roles.
Okay.
The combination of acting as and fact-check response offers some really fascinating possibilities.
It does.
This one caught my eye as well. It sounds like a game changer.
Yeah.
For those training scenarios.
Sure.
Can you tell us more about how this pairing works?
Yeah. So imagine you want to train, customer service agents to handle those difficult situations. Right. Let's say a frustrated customer dealing with repeated internet outages.
Right.
So the acting as template allows you to create that realistic simulation where the LLM actually plays the role of that angry customer.
So instead of just role-playing with a script, the agents are interacting with a virtual customer.
Yes.
That feels almost real. I can see how that would be way more effective for training purposes.
Absolutely. And to ensure accuracy and consistency,
Uh-huh.
the fact check response template comes into play.
Okay.
So as the agent provides explanations or solutions,
Right.
the LLM can fact check their responses in real time,
Oh, wow.
making sure that, they align with company policies and accurate information.
So it's like having, this built-in quality control mechanism for your training program.
Yeah.
Ensuring that, agents are providing correct information and handling, situations appropriately.
Exactly. And this combination, it has applications, beyond just customer service. Well, think about, training scenarios for healthcare professionals, financial advisors.
Right.
Really, any field where accuracy and compliance are critical.
Yeah.
The potential to enhance training and improve performance is huge.
It really is. These examples are truly inspiring.
Yeah.
It's clear that this complementary prompting isn't just, a niche technique.
Right.
It's a fundamental shift
Yes.
in how we can interact with and leverage the power of LLMs.
I completely agree.
As we've been talking about, these different combinations,
Yeah.
it really strikes me that we're not just giving LLMs instructions anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're actually collaborating with them in a way that was, unimaginable just a few years ago.
It's a real paradigm shift. We're moving from, simply extracting information to actively shaping and molding it, exploring these multiple perspectives and even challenging the LLM's own outputs to reach those deeper levels of understanding.
Absolutely. And speaking of challenging outputs,
Yeah.
let's revisit that example of the chain of density prompt.
Okay.
Combined with a tone changer.
Sure.
It's a great illustration of how we can use, complementary prompting to craft nuanced and impactful communication.
Absolutely. So let's say, you're working on a project that involves summarizing those complex research findings on climate change.
Right.
Your goal is to communicate these findings to, 3 distinct audiences.
Okay.
The general public, policymakers, and fellow researchers.
Yeah, each audience requires a different approach. Right?
You do.
The level of detail and the tone of the message really needs to be tailored for that maximum impact.
Precisely. So using the chain of density prompt, you could create, 3 distinct summaries.
Okay.
A concise and easy to understand version for the public.
Makes sense.
A more detailed analysis for those policymakers. And a highly technical overview for your fellow researchers.
So we're essentially creating 3 different versions of the same information.
Right.
Each tailored to its very specific audience.
Exactly. But then comes that tone changer.
Okay.
Which allows you to adjust, the emotional tone of each summary.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, I know.
So, for the general public, you might want a hopeful and engaging tone that focuses on, those potential solutions.
Right.
But for policymakers, a more neutral, data-driven approach might be more effective.
Absolutely.
And then for your fellow scientists, that purely objective and technical style would be most appropriate.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
Communication is not one size fits all.
Right.
By tailoring the density and the tone of that information, we can ensure that our message resonates with each audience and achieves its intended impact.
This concept has implications, far beyond just summarizing research findings.
It does.
Imagine applying this to, marketing materials, educational content, even, internal communications within a company. The possibilities are truly endless.
And as LLMs become, more sophisticated, we can expect, even more nuanced and creative applications of these techniques.
Right.
Imagine being able to generate content that not only, conveys information accurately, but also adapts to the emotional state or learning style of that individual user.
It's like taking personalization to a whole new level.
It is.
We're moving from, that broadcast model of communication to a truly individualized approach.
It's a really exciting development.
It is.
But, it's important to remember that with, any powerful technology comes responsibility.
Of course.
We need to be mindful of those potential biases in LLMs and ensure that, the content they generate is accurate, fair, and used ethically.
That's a really crucial point. Yeah. It's not just about the technical capabilities. It's about using them wisely and for the greater good.
Absolutely. The goal of this complementary prompting is to enhance, human communication and understanding.
Right.
It's about using these tools to, bridge gaps, foster collaboration, and unlock those insights that, wouldn't even be possible otherwise.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground today, and I'm personally feeling very inspired by the potential of this complementary prompting.
Me too.
It's clear that, this isn't just a passing trend.
Yeah.
It's really a fundamental shift in how we interact with and leverage the power of LLMs.
I agree. It's a really exciting time to be working in this field.
It is.
And I'm eager to see how these techniques continue to evolve and
Right.
shape the future of communication.
To wrap things up, I want to leave you all with a challenge.
Okay.
Think about, a complex problem or question in your own work.
Okay.
Could combining, these different types of prompts unlock a more effective and insightful solution from your LLMs?
Good question.
I encourage you to, experiment, explore, and see where this journey takes you.
Remember, the real power of this complementary prompting lies in its collaborative nature. You're not just giving orders to an AI.
Right.
You're working with it.
Yeah.
You're guiding it.
Right.
And ultimately learning from it.
Absolutely.
Embrace that collaboration, and you'll be amazed by what you can achieve.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of complementary prompting.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.